Hello, and welcome to the official podcast of the Cleveland International Film Festival, CIFF Speaks, sponsored by Wayside Furniture. I'm Dee Perry, and I'm joined by my co-host and producer, Aaron Spears. And Aaron, one of the things I enjoy most about the film festival is the chance it gives us to learn about diverse cultures.
I really appreciate that too, Dee. I think that's the power of film. It can take you to places that you aren't going to be able to experience and characters that you will never be because you're not that person. And I think that really speaks to the film we're talking about today, Americanized. It's the world of a young woman who finds herself at a cultural crossroads.
And joining us now is the writer-director of that film, Erica Eng. Thank you, Erica, for being with us on CIFF Speaks. It's really a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So when your film begins, we hear a catchy rap song as background music and see hands putting finishing touches on a bunch of long braids. And I felt like we were being primed to see the face of a young African-American woman when the shot moves up, but we don't. So what's the effect you were going for with that opening?
That was actually really purposeful. I didn't want to reveal her face just yet. And I think it was really supposed to be about like this girl really trying to embrace a culture that wasn't hers. So anything signifier that you saw didn't feel like it'd be an Asian girl's room. You might see like a little light packets on the wall. If you're Chinese, you might recognize that. But it's like a basketball or like a sweater. So you don't really know who this was. Right. But it's also like showing you like what an Asian American home looks like for me. Like it doesn't look that Asian, just looks really like an American girl. That track in the beginning is by Zion I called The Bay. And I grew up on that song, a really young kid. And it was so important to open the film that way. And also he kind of primes you what the Bay looks and feels like. And so whenever I think nostalgia wise and back to when I was young, I think of that song. And so it felt like a perfect opener to prime like what it felt like being a teenager kid.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, Americanized, your film is set in Oakland, California, where you grew up. And you're already talking about how personal even just the music selection was for you. So is this a autobiographical, a little bit more fictionalized version? Kind of set us up for how you crafted this story and where it came from.
It's definitely autobiographical, but it's fictionalized event. Well, actually, some of the events are true. So some of the events, I would say most of the events are based on real events that happened to me. The only thing that I didn't actually do was do like a game-winning shot right when the buzzer.
I'm so disappointed. Wow.
I don't left of my memory, but you know, I'm on the egg. That's a real situation that happened to me when I was like coming up to my grandmother's house, and all the events I wrote in there is like from a kid to like in my 20s. Whole experience feeling like I don't understand who I am, I don't belong. For like my whole life before my 30s, basically. So when I was in college, I lived near my grandmother at SF State, and she had a black eye. I thought something hit her. But because she's an old woman, she lives by herself. But she said that she fell and that she was rubbing an egg on her eye. And I thought that was like the most Chinese superstitious thing I've ever seen and heard, that I had to like, oh, that's like a little nugget of like her being Chinese, super Chinese and superstitious. Mm-hmm. The locker room scene is very similar to girls I grew up with. I actually was recalling a memory where they're all like got at me about something. And I was like, get at me? What does that even mean? And they all like, roared in laughter. I didn't know what that meant. And so there's like a couple of like very like nuanced things that I felt like, you know, kind of cut under my skin, but it's one of those things that like, you don't really put them down on purpose. Like you're not saying anything to their face. You're not really being like, you suck. It's more just like, oh, that was interesting.
Yeah.
You know, and that makes me feel so shitty.
It's all about the tone.
Yeah.
Tone. And it kind of shows that like we all like rub each other the wrong way by accident. But also like we have like maybe malintentions. We don't even know, but we're all kids and we all project ourselves onto other people, and it just makes us all feel uncomfortable.
I spent my high school time as a theater nerd. My sister, though, was all basketball and all through high school. So when I shared the film with her, the locker room scene specifically, she was like, yeah, that's it.
You're supposed to be like, yeah, whatever. Like you're supposed to be like, oh, I'll get you back on the court or whatever. But me being insecure, it's like, oh, they hate me. And that's like,
Yeah.
I think the girls on the team didn't really hate me. I think like it's more about if you're not a starting person, like a starting teammate, you're like, oh, you're a bench warmer, or like, oh, you're not, if you fuck up in the game, then people kind of do shit on you. So like the teasingness is very similar, or they won't like shake your hand. So like when you get off the court, you're supposed to like dap them. And then my dad specifically remembers this memory where I got off the court and the girls shaded me and he got so mad. He wanted to say something. I was like, I don't even remember that. I lightly remember it, but it's like an example of things that I would like kind of cut out of my brain. But that's why there's like small little moment on the court where they like kind of like whatever. They don't do it.
Those are key to the characters though. Like those are moments like you can't skip that. That just adds so much texture immediately when you see that.
Right.
Yeah, I like the texture stuff. And that was my sister's actual 99 Camry with a little radio. Yes, back in the day, if anyone was born before the 2000s, they know, like when you get your shit stolen, you get a fake radio and you pop in the face of the radio.
100%.
And if you use the face of the radio, you can't play the radio. So you get in the car and you're like, where's the face of the radio? Oh, would you have it? Where'd you put it? And it's an argument with your sister.
That's great. You mentioned your grandmother, and the film drops us right into the middle of Erica Eng's teenage life, where she seems to be living with her grandmother. I wondered if it sounds like that wasn't the case during your teenage years, but you simplified the relationships for the film?
Yeah, and I've faces to Erica's, but I wrote her, my first draft as Erica, then I wrote her name's actually Christine.
Ah.
I never say it, so that's why.
Yeah, they say the last name Eng, but they don't say the first name. Okay.
Yeah, because you go by your last name anyways. When you're on the team, no one really calls you by your first name, and they always call you by your last name. And so, yeah, it's actually Christine, but I didn't want to put that in the no, like, who's Christine? But yeah, I did that to simplify it because I felt like, I'm fifth generation Chinese American. My great grandfather was born in California, and my grandmother grew up in Pittsburgh, California. And I felt like she is the last person that's connected to my Chinese lineage because both my other grandparents on my other side are passed away. And my grandmother was like the last one that connected me to my culture because she had these like little small things that was so Chinese, like the basket of too many plastic bags under the kitchen sink. And like, she just has like very like immigrant, like lifestyle habits that like translate to my dad and then on to me. And then like, we're basically living in America, but we kind of adopted from her. It was really important to have her be the beginning and end of the film because it's about being Asian. It's about not really understanding like what that means. And she's like, this is what it looks like. It doesn't have to be anything, it's just like your values, what you do at home, and maybe sometimes the food you make, but like, you don't have to do a whole lot to be Chinese. You just are. And I think it took me to my late 20s to like be comfortable with that. Because in school, the signifiers were like, you speak Chinese, or something, or this about that. But I condensed it. Otherwise, it'd be too much to see a mom and a dad and a sister and a da-da-da.
Well, I think that worked out perfectly because it gives you the sense that she has a comfortable and a loving home that's still there, but she's also, it creates that split between different cultures, like you were saying, that she's kind of doing this really tough balancing act throughout the film. One side of that, though, is being on the high school girls basketball team. And again, as I mentioned, I shared with my sister who played, and she was like, they're playing. So she also approved of like the playing basketball scenes. Were those actors that you then had to work with to play basketball, or did you go for like, let me find a basketball team and teach them how to act? Or how did you end up casting those parts because you need those specific skills for a good chunk of this narrative?
There are only 2 actors on the basketball team. So this is the story, which I wish I would have said that at CIFF. So the Oakland High team, that the opposing team, those are all real girls who are actual Oakland High School Wildcats. And the coach, Orlando Gray, is the actual coach on the opposing team. So I scouted all around Oakland for an Oakland basketball team. There's only like 5 schools left. And I asked all the teams and no one responded back. And Oakland High was the only one that was able to be like, I'm going through your doors, I'm going to your practice, and I'm telling you what I want to do, and please help me. And I thank Orlando for that, because without him, like, I wouldn't have a team, I wouldn't have anybody. And they brought the families to the basketball scene, like the kids and the parents are all their parents.
Oh, nice.
That's so cool.
Game. Sideline didn't have a basketball team. They were undergoing a change of hand. They didn't have a coach and they didn't have a team. So when I walked up there, I was like, shit. And I was like, I danced. So when I was in high school, I danced, and we kind of knew like the drama teacher there. So I went to the dance. I went to Miss James, my dance teacher. I went to the drama teacher. I like walked around the campus and talked to the volleyball coach. I talked to the tennis coach. And I was like, I just need girls who would want to be in this. And so I went and got all these signatures. I emailed like hundreds of kids who like would say they would do it. And then like only like, 8 showed up, which is typical.
Yep.
But the team for Skyline is a combination of theater, tennis, dance, and a couple of the people that we casted. So Tori is the girl that like dribbles the ball the most.
Mm-hmm.
We casted Tori, and she was the first person I casted. Because, she was at my table read, and I was like, that's my character. And like, she's like really bold and she's really in your face, but she's like a little shorter than Stephanie. And so like, that's exactly what it is. But she's like the strongest player. And she also played D1 basketball, but she's also a performer.
Oh, wow.
She acts and she's a performer. The girl on the other team, that number 5, she's her, another D1 basketball player. So I was like, get the girls to play.
Yeah.
But Tori is a good example of someone, Sahara is the girl that played it. She's a good example of someone that's like a real person kind of, but she just played herself. Mm-hmm. And then Stephanie, of course, was casted. I casted more adult people to play the other teammates. Mm-hmm. So we can do the parking lot scene where the end happens.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, so then I'm curious, as you're filming those scenes, then did you choreograph it like a dance sequence? Like I want to do dribble here, pass here, or did you just sort of let them play a scrimmage or play a game and capture as best you could?
I wrote it in the script.
Okay.
So I played basketball, of course. And so I wrote all the beats in the script. So the first half of the game is about Stephanie losing her game because they're tied, but she's fucking up.
Yeah.
So she misses the basket. She takes out, she loses the ball, and then she loses it again. So I had to force the ball out. And in the script, it's supposed to be like a dramatic jump ball. And then the ball goes in the air in slow motion and da-da-da-da. And so we just instead did a dive. And so I asked my friend, and her friend used to work for the Warriors, I think on the marketing team, but she played college ball. And so she came as sports choreographer and she helped talk to the girls.
Oh, sweet.
And block them out with me. And so she ran practices with them. Mm-hmm. And so, but all the beats are real. Yeah. But she also had to tell the tennis players where to go.
Well,
a lot of it is hit your marks. So if you're a dancer, you're a theater, like stay there.
Yeah.
And you're here to here. And they knew that.
Yeah.
Wow. Speaking of dance, you mentioned that you used to dance and you also played basketball. Your film, Christine, doesn't fit in with the group that she's in playing basketball. She doesn't seem to fit in with other Asian kids who are at the school. And I'm curious if that is a mirror of how you felt, even though you were in multiple groups in school.
Yeah, I mean, that's what school's about, though. Like, when you're in school, you try to fit into multiple groups. It's not just one thing. But also, like, being Asian Americans on a monolith. Like, we sometimes don't like each other, and that's real. And we can't clump each other up based on race. Like, the girls on the team were nicer to me than some of the Asian girls. Like, I would never them anyway. So just like, I wanted to show, that was actually the most important thing that I felt was so different about my story opposed to other Asian American stories about identity, where it's like, oh no, the lunch and then it's stinky. I actually did that to another girl in middle school where she brought lunch and I was like, what is that? But not in a disgusting thing. It looked good, but like smelled the whole portable. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what is that smell? And I just remember I was in middle school. I could just see like the little sinking of the shoulders. I was like, shit.
Oh.
I was like, no, it looks good. And because it's like, I knew, and she had like the Chinese spoon, the soup spoon. Oh my God. I just remember that. And so I felt that it was like an important thing in the script where you flip it, where it's not like a white girl telling you, oh, that stinks and da da da. It's like me doing it. And it just show like the way we experience like being American or being Chinese is so different from each other.
So you mentioned you've been in California for a while or your whole life, and you said your family go back a few generations there. I'm really curious about how you got interested in making films, but I kind of want to ask you also in a very Oakland and Bay specific. There's an amazing bit of recent American independent films coming out of Oakland, going back to Fruitvale Station up through Boots Riley and Sorry to Bother You and Joe Talbot. Was that the film community that's around you there in San Francisco and Oakland in the Bay Area? Was that an inspiration or get you into films, or is that something else just got you there?
No, I've been making films since I was 15.
Okay,
so that didn't exist.
Right.
I'm not gonna suppose my age.
Well, you're 17 now.
No, Mr. Fry was my computer teacher. He's actually in the film and he helped me get Skyline as a location. And I was in his computer class. And Pixar, it was like when Pixar first came to the Bay and everyone's so excited about Pixar. And everyone's talking about Lucas. And I got into film because I wasn't the best student. I loved watching television. I watched like hours of I Love Lucy and like cartoons. And so I took his animation class and I really liked it. And he's like, if you like animation, you should learn about film. And I secretly think it's because the graduating class of filmmakers were leaving and he wanted to like have more students in his film club. Oh. And I secretly think that's the reason why. But he helped me get an internship at KOL, which is like the Oakland Public Radio television station. And from there, one of the workers there saw like I really loved what I was doing and learning. And so I was the first student at this program called Youth Sounds. And it was partnered with an audio program called Bump. And Bump is like where kids go to learn music production and be like write lyrics and rap. And we learned video. So we shot their videos. And so I came up trying to be like a documentarian and music video director. Okay. That was more my goal because the whole town was more about like spoken word and rapping. So I hung out with a lot of spoken word artists and rappers and try to shoot their like behind the scenes MTV documentaries. Oh, yeah. And like, in the streets and like doing these like rap videos. Like that's what I wanted to do for my life. And so I shot some films when I was a kid. My first film that the Youth Sounds, they mentored me and said that I should learn how to direct. That film got into SF International when I was a teenager, and they gave me $5,000 for the Golden Gate Award. And I took that money and bought my own camera gear. And in college, I started making more films. And I wished I had a community of filmmakers growing up, but I didn't. I felt like I was the only one doing it and there wasn't anyone else with a camera because that was before DSLRs. Yeah. Like that didn't exist yet. We're just 4:3. I had to Panasonic DVX 100B and it's got 4 frames. That was a big shit.
Yeah.
With XLR recording. So that's how I started. And I think once the DSLR boom kind of came, there's more people doing more films and trying to do more films in the Bay. But truth be told, I didn't get much work in the Bay. Okay. They wouldn't hire me. I was like just a young kid, just a young girl. But I moved down to LA to start my career.
Nice.
And that includes a number of commercials and as you mentioned, music videos. I'm curious about if that previous experience was helpful or not when it came to making short narrative film.
Yeah, so when I moved to LA not knowing anyone, and I reached out to my friend who went to UCLA, and he's like, yeah, you should have this family. They're really talented. This guy, Daniel Ferris and Tiffany Goucher. I was like, all right. So Daniel was the first one that I met, and he's D-Smoke. And he won like Rhythm and Flow on Netflix, and he was nominated for a Grammy. But I didn't know that. We were just kids. And so when I did a couple of his music videos, I found myself like writing stories for him. And so we did one with his mom called Awesome You Are, but then afterwards we did something called Fighter. And that was like my first taste of like doing a narrative with a music video. And I always felt like whenever I was doing something that had a story, I was always like, but why are they doing that? Why would they do this? And I like to dive deeper in a story. And I didn't realize I liked narratives. I was just like, I'm just OCD and I have to know everything. I couldn't make just things to make them. I just had to be like, but why was that? So when I was writing this film, and as I'm writing more often, I'm finding that I just love the analyzation process of like, but why would that character do that? And is it because of this, or can we do that? So I love that about making films. But music videos is such a training ground for visuals. And I studied cinematography in college, and I want to be behind the camera. I only want to shoot stuff. I didn't want to like write about it. I want to make stuff. So music videos and these little experimental shorts gave me the ability to just crank out videos constantly. I shot like 5 videos a year all the time, even though I worked at a desk, at nights, at weekends, I was cranking them out because I loved shooting. So that got me in the rhythm of it. And I got like all my mistakes that you'll never see.
Yeah.
all my hidden on my YouTubes, you'll never see all those like videos I did back in the day.
I had seen some of the short films you made on your website. There was a dance one that I really loved. It's just a young man alone in the rain on a table, and it's just I wondered about the story there. So
yeah,
it seemed like there was.
That's another thing. Like whenever I'm not shooting, I have to shoot. So I make up stuff just when I'm bored and I get antsy and I'm not working for more than a month. And so On Point came about because I came across a photo on Facebook of this flex dancer wearing ballet shoes. So a lot of flex dancing is on point, and a lot of turf dancing too is on point. But he did it in ballet shoes. I'm like, oh, what if he can dance in those shoes? Do you still have those shoes? I literally hit this guy up on Facebook, like, hey, I'm a filmmaker and this is like what I want to do. And do you still have the shoes? And would you want to shoot something with me? And he was so kind and so gracious. And so I just so happened to be in New York, I think, for a film festival. And so I hit up my DP who moved over there. I was like, let's just shoot this guy and let's just see what happens. And, as I was flying over, a storm was coming. Like, should we cancel? Like, can we shoot this? What if it rains? It's like, I'll wrap my camera. It'll be okay. It was just like me, my DP, and his AC, and that was it. And we were just kind of filming this. But when I was Facebooking Drew Dollars is the performer. He's an incredible performer. And we talked about the film. We talked about what it meant as a flex dancer, but also in the ballet shoes. And I really wanted to be a piece about masculinity too. And just like what how I liked how he performed all the way through the elements, but he never broke and felt soft. Like it felt so masculine. It's like, why can't you be masculine in ballet shoes? Like ballet shoes are so hard. And then, it's kind of like that struggle that he portrayed. He did it so well, and it only made sense to do it with Vivaldi Four Seasons. So you're kind of having this classical elements with this like really masculine performer and all these like harsh elements. So it's like a very balance of like masculine and feminine.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, looking forward for you, we saw that you were selected for Disney's Launchpad Shorts Incubator program. So what does that mean for you? And since you can't stop filming, what is that sending you towards project wise or work wise?
Well, I hope it's going to send and prime me to create more narratives and get into television or features. It's going to help me. It helps me a lot. I mean, it already started. We already started in January. Mm-hmm. So we did a whole few months of mentorship. The two mentors I have are from Marvel and Lucasfilm. And they've been really great, like helping us with the development process of our film. We just locked our scripts. So we're actually literally diving into production next week.
Nice.
And so it's really, we had our directing class last night, and I was texting my friend and I was just like, I fucking just love directing. I just love it. Like we were talking about each other's scripts and we read for them, like helped them like do the dialogue. And I was just like, so what does a mom do for a living? And because I was trying to dissect this dialogue and the relationship with the father. It's not my script, but we asked each other very like pointed questions about like the character's motivation, and it helped jog our memories of like, oh yeah, we should probably think about that. But I just had so much fun like dissecting films for 3 hours. That's like best thing.
That does sound like fun.
It's fun. And I hate acting. I would never act, but like we got to act in each other's things, and I got to take direction for the first time. And that was fun. I was like, but what do you mean by this note? And we were like talking about it. And I was like, oh, so if I were an actor, I'd probably tell them this because that would help me.
Yeah.
And we were helping each other like direct. But I think like this is all just teaching me just to work with the studio system, like how to take feedback and how to adjust, how to work within a system that you're not in control of. Because in commercials, I'm the only director. It's only my producer. And we make what I want to make, for the client. But with this one, it's like you kind of do have to abide by the studio and the executives. So it teaches us all that politics, which is what commercials kind of primed me for. So I put my client cap on, and any kind of adjustments we can always make. But yeah, like how to make a story that's still yours.
Yeah, I like that.
That's interesting process-wise, the way you're talking about that too, because we spoke with Philip, a director of another short called The Inventor, and he said that out of sheer desperation doing a Zoom table read, he just swapped all the parts. And you could tell the actors going like, oh, I've never thought about the motivation for the other people, because you're so focused on your own part as an actor. And he was like, it just broke it open as a director too, where you see the dynamics in a totally different light, kind of fun in the rehearsal process there.
Well, with my 1 hour of acting experience, gosh, I wouldn't even know how to respond to someone giving me another. But it does help. Like whenever I write something, even for Americanized, I thought of every single perspective, every single line, my poor editor worked on it for 8 months. We would argue 3 frames, whether you cut away with their eyes are up or down, because that means something different.
Yeah.
Are you holding or do you feel something towards the end? And every single beat. And so whenever for this one too, I know every single motivation for every character that you'll never see, where they come from, why they feel that way. The mom's motivation, but you see the mom like twice. And I think like that's a part of something that I learned through Fighter and working with D Smoke too, and analyzing like that music video that we did together. It just like, I want things to be bigger than they are. And I constantly, so this is just like a starting point. This is like a short film, but if we do a feature, like I know exactly like where I can take them.
And that actually plays into my next question, which was how you see short films. Are they a training ground for a feature, or do they also represent something else for you?
For me in particular, I just need a reel. I think to be honest, I think like my other stuff is more of a training ground. Like On Point, I learned a few things. Shooting commercials teaches me a lot. On this one they're bidding now, it's like, I don't know, do you want to go to Chile or Canada? I'm like, I don't know, I never shot there before. So commercials is allowing me to do things like bigger than I've ever done before, with bigger budgets I've ever worked with. So I think the training ground for me is shooting a lot. Even if it's a $60 dance film or like $1 million commercial, like you still learn everything. For short films, it takes so long. Americanized took a year to actually film. I can't imagine I learned a lot through that process. It took me a couple of years to learn that process for one film. But I always shoot in between it because I like to stay fresh, but also I love to create. So even if I do like get my career off the ground and do television or do features, I'll still do a music video if they allow me to. I'll still do a commercial. I really enjoy those formats, but I just love shooting. I don't like waiting.
Yeah, then you're going to have an interesting movie career. So you'll be shooting other things while you're doing a feature.
100%. Like I'm doing the Disney program, but I finished 2 commercials and I'm bidding another one.
Wow.
And I still owe this girl a music video. I keep talking to her about references, and I talked to her for a year and I still haven't shot it yet, but I still do that because I just love to make things. And I think people look at Spike Jonze because of course he's like an incredible filmmaker, but I also too look at him for his career. Like you could shoot Jackass the same year you won an Oscar for Her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like follow the inspiration, follow what you think is like fun and passion. Cause like, it's not just about the like, oh, I have to make big narratives and it has to be this. Like, no, I want to make stuff that I love to make and I don't care what it is.
Well, see, Erica, it was absolute pleasure to chat with you and get to know you a little bit. And we wish you the best of luck with future endeavors.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. We'll look forward to whatever the next thing is.
Man, I really hope that like I do a feature and it's at CIFF and we can just talk again.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would
absolutely.
love that.
And with your work ethic and production style, that could be in like 8 months, like next
Yeah,
year.
right.
Oh Lord, if I ever.
Our guest has been writer-director Erica Eng, who joined us to talk about her short film, Americanized. You can see that film as part of CIFF 46 Streams, which runs online from April 10th through the 17th. Find out more about what's happening at the film festival by logging on to clevelandfilm.org. I'm Dee Perry.
And I'm Aaron Spears.
And we thank our sponsor for this podcast, Wayside Furniture, keeping it local since 1937. And thank you for listening to CIFF Speaks.